So today, this story is about me, George Lewis, and how I laid it to the top of jazz. Before the video starts, leave a comment down below of where you are from and what time it is for you. It's funny how life and all this mess and turmoil can come together in the most unexpected ways. I'm George Lewis, and as I sit here, years after all the madness, the fame, and the firestorms of my youth, I can't help but think about how it all started. The late night rehearsal, the smoky club, the cheap whiskey, and the dreams too big to fit in my chest. If I had told anyone back then that I'd become one of the most well-known jazz musicians of all time, they would have laughed. No, not just laughed. They would have spat in my face. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. The year was 1942, and New York City was alive in ways that I still can't fully explain. The world was changing fast, the war overseas pressing down like a cloud. Everyone had their heads turned towards Europe, yet the heart of the city, particularly Harlem, was beating louder than ever. In the depths of that rhythm was me, a 20-year-old kid from a modest home in the Bronx, trying to make a name for myself. I was black, and that alone was a reason to be overlooked, pushed aside, and forgotten. But I wasn't just any black man. I could play the saxophone like I was born with it in my hand. And that's what kept me pushing forward. I remember my first real taste of the scene. It was a sweltering summer night, and I had a set at Men's Playhouse. A couple of cats from the bands there had heard me play at some jam session and thought I had something. They didn't think I was ready, but they were willing to take a chance, figuring if nothing else, I'd keep the crowd entertained while they swapped stories and laughed. The moment I stepped on that stage, I felt like the world was waiting for me. I couldn't see the audience beyond the lights, but I could feel their eyes. Some faces were full of curiosity, others full of skepticism. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a second, and let my fingers find the keys. The sound that came out was raw, wild, unrefined, but it was real, and that's what Harlem demanded, authenticity. That night was a blur. I remember the applause, but it wasn't the kind of applause that comes from polite clapping. It was deep, throaty, the kind that comes from people who have heard the best and aren't easily impressed. Still, I could tell I made an impression. That was the night I became George Lewis, the saxophone player people would start to remember. My rise wasn't exactly meteoric, though, at least not at first. I spent hours, no, days, playing in every bar, every smoky club, every hole in the wall I could find. Sometimes I was the opening act. sometimes the main feature. But there were always those who were quick to remind me that I was just a colored boy trying to play music that wasn't meant for me. There was one night at the Cotton Club, of all places, when I first encountered one of those backhanded compliments that stick with you. A man in a fine suit, his face as stiff as his collar, leaned over the bar, eyeing me as I sipped my gin. "Boy, you sure do play a mean sax," he said. His words like all slicks over water, smooth but suffocating. If you were white, you'd be the talk of this whole town. I clenched my jaw, but I didn't answer him. What could I say? That I was good enough to take the world by storm, but not because I was black? That I could stand on the same stage as Benny Goodman, Charlie Parker, and the rest, but my skin made me less than them? Instead, I nodded, finishing my drink and walking away without a word. But that night stuck with me. Every note I played from then on, I played with a fire, a defiance that refused to be extinguished. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about proving that I belonged. In the mid-1940s, Harlem was the heartbeat of jazz, but the world was changing. The music was evolving too. With the bebop movement taking hold, the sound was faster, more intricate, and harder to digest for many of the old school fans. But to me, bebop was the sound of freedom, the sound of rebellion. I started recording small sessions here and there, and word began to spread. Soon I found myself sharing the stage with some of the biggest names in jazz. South Seas, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, and even the great Duke Ellington himself. It was a dream, but it was also a grind. Every night was a battle, not just for recognition, but for respect. And yet, despite the accolades, the recognition, and the rise in fame, there was always a part of the world that refused to accept me. There were those who criticized my style, saying I was too different or too modern. There were those who whispered behind my back, saying that my success was nothing more than a fluke. But in my heart, I knew better. This was my moment. It wasn't until 1949 that my career took a real turn. I had just finished recording my first big album, Soul in the City, a mix of bebop and swing that took a more experimental approach than most of the mainstream acts at the time. I remember it like it was yesterday. The smooth hum of the recording studio, the bright red lights, the hiss of the tape as it spun. I was playing with a band that included some of the finest jazz musicians I knew. Guys like Max Roach on drums and Charles Mingus on bass. We were in the middle of one track when I saw him, Louis Armstrong, the great Satchmo, standing in the doorway, smiling that wide, toothy grin of his. George, he called, his voice warm and gravelly. You got something there, man. That's the sound of tomorrow. I nodded, not sure whether to laugh or cry. Louis Armstrong, the godfather of jazz, had just given me his blessing, and that was it. That's when everything changed. In the years that followed, my music became more than just notes on a page. It became an anthem for those who felt invisible, for those who, like me, had been told time and time again that they didn't belong. My name started to travel across the country, and soon it was echoing in the halls of some of the most prestigious venues in the world. I remember the first time I played at Carnegie Hall in 1952. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I had performed in some of the finest places, Cafe Society, the Apollo, but Carnegie Hall, that was a different world. It's about freedom, freedom of expression, of emotion, of identity. And in a time when our very right to exist was being challenged, music became a weapon of defiance. Now, looking back on everything, my journey from the small clubs of Harlem to the world stage, I realized how far I've come. The road was long and hard, filled with pain and sacrifice, but it was worth it. I became more than just a jazz musician. I became a symbol, a black man who dared to dream big, who fought for his place in a world that wasn't ready for him. And in doing so, I became one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time, George Lewis. It's funny, isn't it, how a name, a song, a note can change the world forever. And if I could do it, if I could make it all the way to the top, in spite of everything that was stacked against me, then there's no reason anyone else can't do the same. This is my story. This is my legacy. And if my music lives on long after I'm gone, then I'll know I did something right.